Welcome to the Standards-Based Report Card Field Test Podcast. This is Heather Frizzell, principal at Twin Groves Middle School. The slides you'll see in this podcast were originally presented during a parent meeting held on October 18th, 2012. We've been working to first study and now implement standards-based reporting over the course of the last 2 years. Here you see our timeline for implementation. As noted, we're launching a field test of standards-based reporting during trimester 2 of this school year, with the goal of a tiered implementation in all content areas during the course of the 2013-2014 school year. Before moving into the details and logistics, let's first define a field test. In simplest of terms, a field test is a way to trial new methods before implementing them full scale. This allows us to adjust our work before a system-wide launch. So what are we looking for during this field test? This list shows the primary things we'll be monitoring during the next 2 trimesters. As we learn more through this process, you can trust that we'll make adjustments. Here, you see the list of content areas and, in some cases, grade levels participating in the field test. Please note that all language arts classes are joining, and this is in direct connection with our implementation of the Common Core Aligned Standards this year in language arts. At this point, the question parents most frequently ask is how Stevenson High School feels about both the concept of standards-based reporting as well as District 96's plan to implement these practices now. As you can see from the comments shown here by Stevenson Superintendent Dr. Eric Twaddell, he's fully supportive of our efforts. In fact, standards-based grades will provide Stevenson with information about District 96 students that they've never had before. There are even teams at Stevenson who are experimenting with standards-based grading practices now. In giving a bit of background research and rationale for our changes in reporting, it's important to frame all of this work within our fundamental purpose, which is and always will be student learning. Aligned to this fundamental belief, then, is our mission statement for the report card. At its essence, we want to clearly communicate student learning, making sure that we articulate student progress on both learning standards and work habits, as we know that they are different but related things. There's a great deal of research about grading practices. As O'Connor states in this slide, traditional grading practices don't truly convey what students have learned. Guskey argues that the primary role of reporting is communicating student learning, and that when reporting is done well, student learning is truly impacted. To be clear, when we talk about standards, in District 96 we refer to the standards identified by each grade level. These are distributed to parents on curriculum night and are always available on the District 96 website under the curriculum link. Here, you see our 8th grade learner standards for the 12-13 school year. So, why are we moving to standards-based reporting? For many reasons, the most essential of which are listed here. First, we'll provide students with greater clarity about what they are expected to know and be able to do. By reporting student mastery by target, we'll be able to share much more specific information about what each learner can do well and where they need more practice or support. We can also compare his or her learning to the mastery level expected. Finally, we will be more consistent in our practices within teams, across grades, and across our schools. We're certain that these changes in practices will positively impact our students. We want to help them move from earning points to truly understanding their learning, what they do well, where they need to work harder, and how they learn in general. In fact, research tells us that when students are more focused on what mastery looks like, they begin to shift their thinking from what did I get to how do I get better, a growth mindset we would want for all learners. Now, moving to the logistics of the field test, we want to be very clear about what will be different for students in field test classes. First, let's discuss the indicators for achievement. The way we measure student learning will be different. Instead of grading on a traditional 100-point percentage scale, we will now indicate each student's mastery on each learning standard using a 4-point scale. Please note that these 4 points are descriptors, not numeric values that can or should be averaged. Our expectation is that all students master all learning targets, thus earning a score of 3 or mastery. Students who demonstrate mastery of some parts of the standard or who still require assistance earn a score of 2 or below expectations. A student who, even with help, continues to make little progress toward mastery would earn a score of 1 or well below expectations. On the other end of the continuum, some students will go beyond mastery of our already rigorous targets. These students who not only show mastery but also go beyond what was explicitly taught, will earn a score of 4 or extends, meaning that they have extended the target to new, higher levels of thinking. When we think about this concept of extends thinking, then, we know that whenever possible, we have to provide opportunities for students who show mastery to stretch that mastery to a deeper level. In doing so, and explicitly identifying what an extension of the standards looks like, we're better able to provide supports, structures, resources, and instruction for students ready to learn and do more. It is important to note, though, that some standards cannot be extended. For example, standards focusing on skills related to grammar or summarizing ask students to show mastery only. Based on this, let's talk about how students' grades will be calculated then. As shown here, when reporting on learning standard mastery, we will apply the 4-point scale to individual skills or concepts. Each standard will be reported individually, with the most recent student work considered more intently than student work early in instruction. This will not be averaged, as that would penalize students for not knowing information at the beginning of instruction. Averaging within standards also does not value growth over time. Once each standard is reported, then each student's standard score is averaged to create an overall course average, which will then convert to a letter grade. Mathematically, this makes sense, as each standard carries the same weight. As long as the standard score reflects a true picture of the student's mastery, we feel confident that these scores can be averaged together to create and calculate a final course grade. As stated earlier, we know that students' work habits certainly relate to, but are not the same as their mastery of learning standards. When we report on work habits, and we will do so separately from standard mastery, we will do so only on a 3-point scale, applying the same growth over time approach within standards, and then averaging across standards. Students will not receive a letter grade for their work habits. This slide illustrates specifically what we consider to be work habits and how we will measure these learning traits. You'll see that we're measuring how frequently students complete their work, participate in learning, and follow classroom expectations. The next question we're frequently asked by parents and students as well is, what will the new report card look like? Specifically, how will the new report card be different than our current middle school report card? This slide highlights the differences between our past practices in reporting and what you have to look forward to with a standards-based report card. As you can see, the box in the upper left shows a snapshot of how a student's language arts grade was reported in the past. The chart to the right is a snapshot of the information conveyed in the new standards-based report card. Each standard is listed, with student mastery indicated for each. At the top, the average of all targets is noted, along with the course letter grade. Our conversion scale is also shown at the bottom left to illustrate how the standard average correlates to a letter grade. Parents will also notice a shift in PowerSchool. This will allow us to report students' work along the way aligned to specific learning standards, again using the 4-point scale. Our updates to PowerSchool will allow us to fully implement standards-based reporting, including the separation of academic mastery and work habits. Here, you see a snapshot of how a student's progress will be reported along the course of a trimester. Each assignment will be linked to a specific standard, clearly illustrating how tasks align to the standards. Parents and students will have access to this information at all points in time simply by logging into PowerSchool. Let's now look at a specific example of how standards-based reporting will work, using 2 hypothetical students, Katie and Brandon. This slide contains traditional scores that Katie and Brandon earned for one Trimester 2 7th grade language arts learning target, which was distinguish the main ideas and supporting details in order to summarize the order of events in a story or nonfiction text. You'll notice that Katie scored a 62, 59, 66, 55, and 58 on 5 different assignments related to this target. Brandon scored a 0, 7, 98, 100, and 95. The question is, what student looks more like a student who knows the learning target after completing the assignments? Clearly, Brandon struggled at the beginning of the trimester, but now is mastering this learning target, while Katie is still not mastering the target at all. However, when using a traditional grading and reporting method, the average of both students' grades would indicate a grade of 60% or D-. So let's translate this scenario from traditional scoring, now using standards-based reporting methods. We will now apply these achievement criteria discussed earlier in this podcast to Katie and Brandon's scores. Now you see Katie and Brandon's data using the 4-point scale over time. Using the learning trend approach provides a more accurate summary of each student's learning and gives students credit for their growth over time. The most recent evidence of work has the greatest weight. So you see, in applying the 4-point criteria, Katie ends with a final target score of 2.0 or below standards, while Brandon's score at the end is a 3.5, saying he has mastered the standards and is well on his way towards showing extends level thinking. This slide then shows how averages can be calculated across several learning targets, in this case, 4 targets, to come up with the final summative letter grade, with Katie having an average score of a 2.25, converting to a course grade of a C, and Brandon having an average standard score of 3.25, converting to a final course grade of an A. I hope that the information in this podcast has helped to answer your questions about standards-based reporting. Should you still have questions, want to have a conversation, or need clarification about any of the ideas presented in this podcast, please don't hesitate to contact me at Twin Groves or Greg Grana at Woodlawn. We're always happy to answer your questions. Thank you for joining me and have a wonderful day.